IAS Market Talk, your trusted source for timely egg market insight, brought to you by Innovative Egg Services. Each week, we break down the latest beef market trends impacting Northeast Iowa and Southwest Wisconsin with expert updates tailored specifically for our IAS members. This week, you'll hear directly from Dave Rueber, IAS Beef Production Specialist, who brings decades of experience and deep knowledge of the cattle industry to these conversations. Dave has been providing market updates to producers for years, and now he brings those insights straight to you through this podcast. So tune in weekly for what you need to know, straight from people you know. With that, here's Dave Rueber with the latest on what's happening in the cattle markets this week.
David Rueber, Beef Production Specialist for Innovative Ag Services, calling with a beef market commentary for August 27th. We'll start with a recap of last week. 245 pretty much across the board was buying cattle last week. There was a few cattle sold a tick higher than 245, but one of the main packers that had kind of been holding back a little bit the 2 weeks before stepped up last week and was at 245. The South, which had historically been running $5 to $10 behind us, they sold cattle for $240, so they're back to within $5 of what we are market-wise. Meat prices, in that $390 range, give or take a little bit. Some of them high-yielding cattle are kicking out a heck of a good price, reverted back to live, with some of these 64, 65% dressed cattle at $390 are dollaring up really good as well. Probably the biggest news the last few weeks has been this box beef explosion. We had another $7, $8 up day this week. Boxes up there in that pushing kind of record high for choices, or choice boxes, 414. Selects running about $20 back, give or take, but just tremendous up rally, kind of holding margins together for packers as a result. This week, probably the big news this week, we had a non-feed report last week that was kind of what they thought it was going to be. So no big surprises there. Then we had a report over the weekend of a lady that had flown in from Guatemala that had a human case of screwworm, which, really shouldn't affect the cattle markets, but just the fact that being able to tie a screwworm case with humans together, people thought the board would be down pretty hard on Monday. And it started out down $3 plus. By the end of the day, it was pretty much back to steady. So by Tuesday, we ignored that. That wasn't going to affect the market. So then we had a pretty good up day. Today was up $3 or $4 for a while. It closed up a buck and a half. But, every day it seems like we're setting record highs. So this market's just on a tear. Fundamentals are great. These Mexican feeder cattle, that border's still shut down and there's no word on the horizon of that opening back up here. Pretty soon those feeder cattle that would have gone to Texas, Oklahoma, that have been staying in Mexico, they're going to be fat cattle. Now, where those cattle get processed is a good question. Mexico's not set up to process an added 1.5 million head of fat cattle. Will they go to Brazil to be processed? I don't know. I mean, that's something to watch. Those cattle that didn't get fed in the U.S. are getting fed somewhere. So just keep an eye on that. That may be something that comes into play here down the road, that those cattle are going to go on the market. That doesn't mean I'm nervous the market's going to drop $20 because of that, but somewhere they'll go to town and be processed. So just something to kind of watch there. Some of the other big news, feeder cattle just keep being on the wild tear they are, up another $10 to $15 this past week, 10 days. Good 800-pound steer north of 360. 7 weights up there pushing $4 on a light 7 weight. The 5 weights and 6 weights are all in the mid 4s to low 4s. Heifers running $20 to $30 back of steers. The supply of feeder cattle continues to be tight. It will stay that way until the runs pick up this fall when these calves start coming to town. But it's just hard to put together, 200 head of yearlings. Doesn't matter if it's heifers, steers, whatever. They're just hard to find. So profitability good, supply tight, demand high. That means high price. What's strange is, a 360 8-weight steer breaks even under 240. and the April board is 240. So they're actually, believe it or not, kind of hedgeable. And you can sell some calls. There's a lot of volatility in this thing. Selling calls has been kind of rough the last 6 months, but there's volatility, which adds value there. If you want to short that call market, there's some pretty good premiums you can pick up that way. So there's some different tools out there that can be done. You just got to look at it and be willing to live with some of the margin risk that comes along with that trade. Once again, my name is David Rueber, Beef Production Specialist for Innovative Ag. Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of IAS Market Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an update. And if you know a fellow producer who could benefit from this information, share this episode with them. For more updates and insights, visit innovativeag.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll catch you next time on IAS Market Talk.